Western Spring Television. Ours it is.
And welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. Unrest breaks out in Lagos, Ogun, Rivers, Ondo and Oyo states over scarcity of new naira notes and hardship. South Africa begins controversial joint military exercise with Russia and China. In Europe, 7 major German airports brought to a standstill after ground crew strikes. My name is Okwayemuni. We begin from Nigeria, where unrest broke out today in parts of Lagos State over the scarcity of the new naira notes and the hardship faced by Nigerians as a result of the policy. Routes earlier began in some areas on the popular Lagos-Ikorodu Expressway as suspected louds in Mile 12, K2 and Ojota areas on the expressway took to the road, attacking commuters and creating chaos. However, the Lagos State Police Public Relations Officer Benjamin Hundeyin confirmed that the initial unrest was under control and free movement had been restored to the area. Meanwhile, some hoodlums in the Ekpe area are using the naira crisis as an opportunity to attack commercial banks in the axis. Pictures emerged online showing banks in the area with broken glasses. It was gathered that many banks have temporarily suspended operations in the area as a result of attacks.
You are gone, you are gone. I want the 4 Zenith right on 4.
Similarly, riots today spread to Ogun communities as youths protested the lingering new naira policy and fuel scarcity. It was gathered that the protesters barricaded the Mowe end of the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway and turned back motorists and travelers. Also, youths in Ore, Odigbo local government area of Ondo State, took to the streets to protest the ban of old 500 naira and 1,000 naira notes by President Muhammadu Buhari. The protesters barricaded the Benin-Ore-Shagamu Expressway, hindering vehicular movements on the highway and chanting solidarity songs. One of the protesters said the president's broadcast on the old naira notes yesterday indicated that it was behind the action of the Central Bank of Nigeria, which caused the scarcity of the new notes. In a related development, some residents of Rivers State today took to the streets of Port Harcourt, the state capital, to protest the federal government's monetary policy and the scarcity of the naira notes. The epicenter was the popular and busy Mile 3 market along Ikwere Road in Port Harcourt City local government area. The protest, however, turned violent a few minutes later as hoodlums seized the opportunity to forcefully dispossess people of the property. Shops were also burgled and the windshields of cars along the streets were smashed, while passersby and drivers were also said to be injured by the hoodlums. According to reports, banks were set on fire by angry protesters, with people out on the roads protesting the new naira redesign. Governor Nyesom Wike, during a media chat yesterday, called for calm in the state, saying it is important for residents to keep the state safe. In Anambra State, hoodlums have attacked the Ukpo High School training camp being used by the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) to train its officials ahead of a general election. It was gathered that the hoodlums invaded the school located in the Nnewi South local government area of Anambra State and disrupted the activities of electoral umpires, trainers, and trainees. Although no life was lost in the incident, it left the students, the National Youth Service Corps members, and other officials in panic and fear. Anambra State Police Public Relations Officer Tochukwu Ikenga said police operatives prevented the hoodlums from abducting or causing harm to the trainees and their trainers. Outside Nigeria, South Africa is starting a joint military exercise with Russia and China that opposition figures say amounts to an endorsement of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The United States has also criticized the 10-day naval drills, which will continue over the first anniversary of the war in Ukraine. But South Africa's government says it remains neutral regarding the conflict and that it routinely hosts similar drills with other countries, including France and the US. The MOSI 11 naval exercises are taking place in the Indian Ocean off the South African coast. In the meantime, Taiwan says it has found the remnants of what appears to be a crashed Chinese weather balloon. Taiwan's military said it had spotted an unidentified object drifting above Dongyin, a Taiwanese-controlled island off China's coast. It later found a crash site on a shooting range. The military added that initial investigations suggested the remnants were part of a meteorological instrument. Taiwan's Defense Minister Chiu Koi-cheng said officials would further investigate the crashed balloon, but would not jump to conclusions. Tensions between China and the U.S. have seen a fresh spike in recent weeks after the U.S. downed what it said was a Chinese surveillance balloon in its airspace earlier this month. The U.S. also shot down 3 other objects it says are unlikely to be foreign spy crafts. In Europe, 7 major German airports have been brought to a standstill after hundreds of ground crew worked out on strike in a row over pay. Aircraft are grounded at Frankfurt, Munich, Stuttgart, Bremen, Hamburg, Hanover, and Dortmund. More than 2,300 flights have been cancelled, affecting 300,000 passengers, with air travel effectively wiped out. Members of the Verdi Union and Civil Service Association are demanding a 10.5% pay increase for workers. Elsewhere, New Zealand's Prime Minister Chris Hipkins says he expects there will be more deaths from a violent storm which killed 8 people and cut off hundreds of communities. More than 4,500 people have yet to be contacted after Cyclone Gabrielle hit on Monday, causing significant flooding and landslides across the North Island. Many cities and towns are also without power or clean drinking water. A national state of emergency has been declared, only the 3rd in New Zealand's history. The storm damaged hundreds of mobile phone masts, and Mr. Hipkins said many of the thousands of uncontactable people are likely to be found alive and well. But he warned that people need to brace themselves for more fatalities. Some 10,000 people are also estimated to be displaced. You're watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. We'll be right back after this break.
Born Jeremiah Oyeni Obafemi on March 6, 1905, Obafemi Awolowo was a prime architect of Nigeria's independence and most consummate advocate of free education and social welfare in Africa's most populous nation. Erudite politician, thinker, and philosopher, Awo was fondly addressed by associates and political colleagues, brought his unique attributes to bear on governance in the defunct Western region. He administered as leader of government business and the premier between 1955 and 1958. Obafemi Awolowo's premiership witnessed pioneering in multi-sectoral policy initiatives and execution. The Western region under his administration paraded several enviable records. first television station in Africa, first real estate in Nigeria, first high-rise building in Nigeria, first modern sports stadium in Nigeria, first agricultural settlement in Nigeria, first modern civil service secretariat in Nigeria, and first industrial estate in Nigeria. His face is on 100 naira denomination as a mark of honor for his distinguished services to his country. Western Spring Television identifies Obafemi Awolowo as a major character in history. The 1914 Amalgamation Treaty is synonymous to the birth of Nigeria. Frederick Lugard, a British Army captain and an outlaw who struck gold in Africa, became the instrument used by destiny to make it happen. The amalgamation of Nigeria was designed for economic reasons by the colonial administration to offset Northern Protectorate budget deficit by Southern Protectorate surplus returns. The amalgamation had ad initio created imbalance in the economic political structure of Nigeria and was responsible for the persistent hiccups and the efforts to forge a united country till today. Nigeria's amalgamation was labeled as the mistake of 1914 by native northern conservatives who neither wanted it nor contributed anything significant to its sustenance. Western Spring Television identifies with Amalgamation Treaty of 1914 as a watershed event in history.
You're welcome back on Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now to the rest of our stories. Hundreds of Syrians living in Turkey have returned to the war-torn country after last week's devastating earthquake. The Turkish government has allowed Syrians with ID cards from the quake-hit Turkish provinces to live for up to 6 months. The rule change has led to hundreds queuing for hours at border crossings. Almost 4 million Syrians have settled in Turkey since civil war broke out in their home country 12 years ago. Some survivors of last week's earthquake are making a trip to the crossings in an attempt to reunite with family members back in Syria, some of whom they have not seen for years. Reports say many of those queuing have traveled with their families and large amounts of luggage, waiting for security personnel to allow them forward for processing. A former security guard at the United Kingdom Embassy in Berlin has been sentenced to 13 years and 2 months in prison for spying for Russia. David Valentine Smith has admitted passing secret information to the Russian authorities. The 58-year-old was caught in an undercover sting operation in which fake Russian agents offered him the chance to obtain highly sensitive information. The judge said Smith put embassy staff at maximum risk by passing on their photos to the Russian embassy in Berlin. But Smith had argued that he had simply wanted to inconvenience and embarrass the embassy and was suffering from depression at the time.
You, as a British citizen, were employed in the British Embassy in Berlin as a security guard from 2016 until the time of your arrest in 2021. In that time, if not before, you developed decidedly anti-British and anti-Western feelings. The people with whom you worked would hear you criticising this country and your then country of residence, Germany. They formed the impression that you were more sympathetic to Russia and in particular to President Putin. You yourself accepted in evidence that at one stage during your employment at the embassy, you were supportive of the Russian-backed rebels in the Donbass region of the Ukraine who wanted to return to Russian rule. I have already found as a fact that these feelings were the direct cause of your offence.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has ruled out giving up any of his country's territory in a potential peace deal with Russia. In a BBC interview to mark a year since Russia's full-scale invasion, he warned conceding land would mean Russia could keep coming back, while Western weapons would bring peace closer. Mr. Zelensky also said a predicted spring offensive had already begun. He does, however, believe Ukraine's forces can keep resisting Russia's advance until they are able to launch a counter-offensive, although he repeated his calls for more military aid from the West. Ukrainian data released this week suggested Russian troops in Ukraine were dying in greater numbers this month than at any time since the first week of the invasion. The United States says it has killed 5 Al-Shabaab fighters in Somalia during a joint operation with the Somali army. The U.S. Command in Africa, AFRICOM, said the airstrike was conducted in Bakadowen in central Somalia. On Thursday, Somali authorities said they had killed more than 300 Al-Shabaab militants in southern Somalia. It comes as Somali federal troops backed by the U.S. clan militia and African Union troops continue a counterinsurgency against the Al-Qaeda affiliate. And now talking business, Pan-African e-commerce platform Jumia says it laid off over 900 workers in order to reduce its cost of operation. The company, in its 2022 fourth quarter final financial report, said the cut represents 20% of its general workforce. Jumia said it experienced an operating loss of 41% year-over-year, reaching $49.8 million in the fourth quarter of 2022, forcing the company to suspend its logistics as a service offering in a number of geographies. The e-commerce firm also discontinued its food delivery operations in Egypt, Ghana, and Senegal, where the activity was subscale. France's state-controlled power company EDF says 2022 was a miserable year with record annual losses of 17.9 billion euros. Energy prices may have jumped to unprecedented highs, but EDF profits were hit hard by a price cap on energy for French consumers and the enforced closure of many of its nuclear power stations for repairs. The losses are the third biggest in French corporate history and the worst for more than 20 years. EDF's debts have spiraled to 64.5 billion euros. And now to some sports stories. The Australian federal government and the Queensland state government today said they will spend a combined $6.5 billion to build new venues and refurbish existing ones ahead of the 2032 Olympics in Brisbane. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Queensland State Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk said this during a joint media conference. Mr. Albanese described it as a nation building, adding that the event is great for Queensland and for Australia. Brisbane will become the third Australian city to host the Summer Olympics after Melbourne in 1956 and Sydney in 2000.
This is a great day for Brisbane, a great day for Queensland, but a great day for Australia as well. This agreement of $7 billion shows what governments can do when they work together. The Gabba redevelopment, of course, is about more than just the stadium. It's about the way that the city functions, and it is all about urban redevelopment as well, and making the city function, making it more livable. I know, as a Sydney-sider, the difference that a Games can make. And here in Queensland, this will consolidate this great city as a global city, as a global powerhouse. But it benefits not just Brisbane as well. It will benefit the whole state of Queensland, but will also benefit our national economy. The nation could look at this as well and say, that is what we are contributing, because this is nation building. This event is a great event for Queensland, but it's
Aston Villa defender Tyrone Mings signed a 2-year contract extension, committing him to the club until 2026. The centre-back was stripped of Villa's captaincy last July by former manager Steven Gerrard, but has impressed since Unai Emery's arrival at the club. The 29-year-old Mings had played every minute in the Premier League under Emery before he missed last Sunday's 3-1 defeat by Manchester City through injury. And now to entertainment. American actor Bruce Willis has been diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia. In a statement on social media, his family said it was a relief to finally have a clear diagnosis. The family said the 67-year-old was diagnosed with aphasia, which causes difficulties with speech, in spring last year, but this has progressed and he has been given a more specific diagnosis. They expressed their deepest gratitude for the incredible outpouring of love. Willis became a household name in the 1980s and 1990s after starring in blockbuster films such as Die Hard, The Sixth Sense, Armageddon, and Pulp Fiction. Before we end Spring Global, here's a recap of our top stories. Unrest broke out today in Lagos, Ogun, Rivers, Ondo, and Oyo states over the scarcity of the new Naira notes and the hardship faced by Nigerians as a result of a policy. South Africa is starting a joint military exercise with Russia and China that opposition figures say amounts to an endorsement of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In Europe, 7 major German airports have been brought to a standstill after hundreds of ground crew worked out on strike in a row over pay. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. I am Okoye Mutiny. Thanks for watching.